My name is H.A. Goodman, and I'm an author, columnist, and journalist. Hit subscribe right now. Definitely check out my H.A. Second Amendment channel. I actually have 2 uploads back-to-back today of me with a Heckler & Koch 45 ACP, 20 feet away, center of the target. Really, it's like the best grouping thus far, one of the best. And really amazing firearm. Check that out. My YouTube representative said, hey, HA, build that channel. I already have 4,000 subs on that. I haven't even worked on building it. So check that out. If you're into firearms, if you watch like Hickok or Iraq Veteran 8888, there's like a million times Yankee Marshall, a million times better, obviously, than my little growing channel. I'm not even an expert, but I am a Second Amendment advocate. I love the Second Amendment. The NRA retweeted one of my Daily Caller articles. I actually used to be a gun control advocate and saw the light. And I explained that in my Daily Caller article that was retweeted by both the NRA and the Gun Owners of America. Guns.com wrote about me and that article, and the Gun Owners of America retweeted that. So please go ahead and check that out. Heckler & Koch, so awesome. Support my voice. Patreon is below. Number 1, President Trump did a brilliant job. So he really did a brilliant job this evening. It was a brilliant speech. It exposed Democratic Party hypocrisy. First and foremost, it really doesn't matter if the Senate or the House or the Congress passes a bill to fund the government. Of course they're going to pass a bill to fund the government. They are the government. They want... D.C. is almost all Democrat, almost all Clinton supporters. Of course they're going to fund an establishment type. So, of course, Republicans, even if they're in Congress, most of them are not really Trump Republicans. They grudgingly go and try to support Trump, even because they know that without Trump, they're not going to be in power. They would never have been in power. And they can't outwardly say, look, they can't. They're caught in between the Paul Ryans and the Jeff Flakes and the Mitt Romneys and people like Jim Jordan. So most Republicans are caught between Jim Jordan and Paul Ryan, or Mark Meadows and Jeff Flake type people. They're obviously going to fund the government because they are the government. When pundits or when Bernie Sanders or when the New York Times says, well, it's not it. When Trump said says it's the Democratic Party's fault. My God, all he has to do is capitulate. Yeah, and if you're morally superior and quote, people are apparently suffering, they're not getting their money, then you capitulate. See, it's incumbent upon Democrats, since they derive power from the same people they're saying are suffering and deserve their paychecks, which I believe also. It's incumbent upon them to give $5 billion when they give tens and billions, $45 billion a month for just one of the countries that Democrats don't want to pull out of. $45 billion a month. I believe it's $45 billion a month in Afghanistan. Let's just check it out right now. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. $45 billion per year. Per year, sorry. That's still $45 billion per year. And they don't want to pull out of that country. They want Americans there indefinitely, forever. These are the liberals who, if you say something on Twitter, which I'm no longer a part of because it's just a nasty toilet bowl of negativity. But if you say, oh, well, Trump is bringing home 7,000 Americans in a country that costs us $45 billion per year, they say, no, we can't give him $5 billion. Now, the national security, so that's hypocrisy beyond belief. They want us there, even though it costs $45 billion per year, indefinitely, but they can't give him $5 billion. That's the hypocrisy in terms of funding. The hypocrisy in terms of national security is President Obama viewed it to be a national security concern when he deported 2.5 million undocumented immigrants. 2.5 million undocumented immigrants. 2.5 million. More than any president ever. President Obama, labeled by one immigrant rights group the deporter in chief. With all due respect to Sam Cedar and Kyle Kulinski and Cenk Uygur and all the wonderful Democratic Party pundits. 2.5 million immigrants deported by President Obama. What right do Democrats have to call Trump a bigot or a racist or a monster or an ogre because of a wall? When Democrats deported 2.5 million immigrants and in New York Magazine and other publications, there was a Senate report on Obama giving children to human traffickers. That is in New York Magazine. Okay, let's look at that right now. I wonder what all these wonderful pundits in the New York Times and how do they feel? New York Magazine. Obama. Okay. Obama administration handed child migrants over to human traffickers. Okay. This is by Eric Levitz, January 29, 2016. Intelligencer. NewYorkMagazine.com. An article by Eric Levitz. The United States government placed an unknown number of Central American migrant children into the custody of human traffickers after neglecting to run the most basic checks on these so-called caregivers, according to a Senate report released on Thursday. In the fall of 2013, tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors traveled to the U.S. southern border. Do you remember when that happened? This was January 29, 2016. Who was President? Oh, Obama. The saint. The Nobel Peace Prize winner. The most amazing president of all time. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if that happened under Trump? Could you imagine if that happened under Trump? It would be never ending. And the same policies of separation of families happened under President Obama. How do we know? Because the pictures that were shared, were the same pictures, were actually pictures from the Obama administration. That's how we know. That's how we know. So I'm just reading here more of that report, and it's disgusting what took place under President Obama's administration. But again, it was Obama and it was liberals who were deporting 2.5 million immigrants and who were endangering human lives. It was okay then. It was never abolish ICE. Do you understand? It's only abolish ICE when it's Trump. All of this empty rhetoric meant to deceive and manipulate from people who cheat and blame Russia in the most xenophobic way possible. All of this nonsense is used to deceive because Trump is the bad guy. Trump is this horrible, horrible person. And he brought up the illegal narcotics, and he brought up the criminal activity. He brought up issues. Of course, if you're talking to me, I know dreamers. Those other pundits don't know dreamers, very likely. I have friends who are dreamers. They're great, amazing people. I've known many undocumented immigrants in my life. They're amazing people. I've very likely known a lot more undocumented immigrants than any of the pundits on the left. And they're wonderful, amazing people. I'm coming at this primarily from the vantage point that a physical barrier, a wall, whether it's a steel slat with spikes on top or whatever, prevents the flow of illegal narcotics, prevents the flow of criminal activity, trafficking of all different types, prevents that from entering in the United States of America. That is a crisis that has been taking place. Read Charles Bowden, amazing, amazing writer and author and journalist who was published everywhere, even in definitely liberal publications, but his books talk about the human crisis and tragedy that takes place at the border every single day. And it's gotten worse every single day. If you had a physical barrier, not just a fence, like a rickety fence that people could just climb over, it's not a big deal, or that traffickers could just smuggle illegal goods, whatever. If you had an actual barrier, it would impede, prevent, or stop the flow of all different types of narcotics, of criminal behavior, of potential criminals. The issue is that when Democrats look and they say, wait, hey, listen, someone perished at the border because of Trump. Well, if they're accusing Trump, that in and of itself, someone losing their life is a crisis then and there, isn't it? But you can't blame President Trump when liberals have sent the message, hey, you know what? If you make the trek, you're fine, you're good. People should not bring their children to make that dangerous journey. This was like at the gym a while back. One of the managers was from Honduras. And this was when I was on the left. And this was Obama was in office. And I'm like, isn't it horrible that I even said, isn't it horrible the way they were treating these young people? And this gentleman was from Honduras. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? He goes to me, the parents should never have let these children, make that journey. And you don't get that liberal, like the liberal New York Times, Vox, you don't get that sentiment. He was coming from a common sense, rational sentiment. And he's from Honduras. And he's an immigrant. And when you look at almost 30% of Latinos or Hispanic voters voted for Trump, to call Trump a racist is the biggest, most ridiculous cop-out. You're not even trying. You're not even attempting to form any argument. He stated the case, and he could have actually called a national emergency. And then you'd have to have Democrats say, well, it's not that big of a deal. And the way, look, YouTube policies, in terms of YouTube policies, I can't even go into detail. If I read parts of Charles Bowden's articles or books, you can get into graphic detail of what goes on in between the United States and Mexico. Very graphic detail. Horrendous. The most brutal, horrific acts. And there's another side of the equation. We provide the demand. I have a fantasy novel that most people don't know about. It's called Breaking the Devil's Heart. And The Logic of Demons, 2 fantasy novels. But Breaking the Devil's Heart, I talk about that in the fantasy novel. The fact that there is a demand for illegal narcotics in the United States of America. We provide the demand. Okay, but the supply goes through the area that Trump wants to build his wall. Democrats are caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of their warped value system. They need to be morally superior, yet they need to also be pragmatic, or they'll never win another election. They won the House only because they deceived people into thinking they would abolish ICE. They're not going to implement Medicare for all. None of Bernie Sanders' the reason I loved Bernie Sanders is because I wanted him to bring home Americans. That was my biggest issue. That's why I wrote an article on Elizabeth Warren originally, then Rand Paul, then Bernie Sanders, and Jill Stein, because they wanted to bring home Americans. Well, at least I thought that Elizabeth Warren did. Bringing home Americans, foreign policy to me, peace between North and South Korea, that alone is enough of a reason to vote for President Trump. That's a paradigm-changing moment in world history. That is a paradigm-changing moment in world history. Never thought possible under Obama. Never thought possible under Obama. So, ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe. Definitely check out HA Second Amendment. I'm building that channel. Help me build that channel. If you are into the Second Amendment and firearms, or even if you're not into it, even if you're a gun control advocate, just check it out and watch. Because my journey is, I was so hardcore on the left that the establishment wrote hit pieces on me. I had hit pieces written on me from the Daily Beast, Raw Story, Wonkette, insignificant blogs that still write against me. I was all spoken about all the time on Reddit. Oh my God, it's bad. Oh my God. And I was right. Clinton lost. And I was right. There's nothing to Trump Russia. There's no evidence. And I'll be right eventually. If Trump doesn't back down, he'll win 2020. If he backs down, he'll lose 2020. So that's pretty much it. He cannot back down. He cannot back down. And making that trek, I mean, just from a human perspective, if people understand that there is a physical barrier that cannot be breached, then they're less likely to make that very, very dangerous trek where you have coyotes, you have all these different types of people who are engaged in predatory behavior. And you cannot convince people, you cannot deceive people into thinking that if they just get to the border, they'll be okay. Because that's not the case. And that's what liberals, don't mind doing. Hit subscribe right now. Definitely check out HA Second Amendment. That's my other channel. It's over 4,000 subs. Let's get it to 10,000 subs. If you know people who enjoy firearms or the Second Amendment, I advance every time. I have a little trouble with revolvers, but I'm working on that. But I think most people have, the 357 Magnum is not very easy to shoot from 20 feet away. But with the Heckler & Koch 45 ACP, Springfield Armory 1911 45 ACP, I did very well with those from 20 feet away. Very well. I did a pretty good job. So check that out. And I actually have an AK, an AR, all that stuff. But you can see the prior segments, I took like a 5-month hiatus. So you can see like a whole bunch of segments prior to the last 3 that I uploaded. But definitely check them out. HA Second Amendment. Check it out. Subscribe to it. And please share it with people who are into the Second Amendment or firearms or gun channels on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. Trump, that was a good speech by Trump. And he could have easily laid out the case for a national state of emergency. Just read a Charles Bowden book and you can do that. One article from Charles Bowden, great author, journalist. Definitely not, necessarily. It's kind of like George Orwell. I don't think the right or the left could own him. But Charles Bowden is one of the great treasures in American literature and American history. Read any of his articles or books on the Southwest and that region and how there are crises and there are national security concerns all the time. Charles Bowden, look him up right now. Thank you so very much. Hit subscribe. Thank you.